Giga saw it and became furious. In front of him was that very hated statue. The hero was smiling from ear to ear astride a cart. The blonde was surprised to realize what he saw in front of him. Peepodong was pulling a cart with a statue with dangling limbs, and the protagonist was shouting insults and calling for an attack. Then the monster reached the extreme level of rage and froze for a moment. The Titan let out a wild scream that was heard throughout the area. Lloyd put a wild smile on his face and thought that he liked this reaction. And then he remembered how they fastened the statue and thought that they even surpassed themselves and that it was still the right decision to trust the Count. The guy immediately called Xavier with an anxious look and said what he would do when he opened the door, and he attacked. The swordsman, frowning as he ran, asked him to tell him the whole plan to the end next time. Having run past each other, the protagonist said with anxiety that this should not happen again. The hamster turned sharply with a whistle and began to run away from the monster. The beast ran away from the Titan with horror on his face, and Lloyd cursed while driving. At this time, Xavier tore off the ground and flew forward, headfirst, and rushed towards the target. He raised his rapier again to attack under the monster's belly. The blonde man gritted his teeth with all his might and was full of determination. The next attack was a sword strike. Fire energy surrounded the blade, which rushed forward. The swordsman was able to strike at the intersection of the shell and use the explosion. Giga was blown up by the explosion and lifted up. The hero, seeing this, was very surprised and turned around. The Titan stood motionless in the forest and smoked, and the blonde man himself was falling backwards at that moment and watched the consequences of the attack. All he managed to do was simply pierce the shell, but did not damage anything. Seeing this, he thought that he was only able to damage the skin, but a huge amount of force was used. But then the young man, falling down, changed his mind and thought that this was just an excuse and wondered if he was so weak that he could not cope with the protection of people. Suddenly, a loud voice of his lord was heard, who praised him for successfully completing the task. The blonde opened his eyes wide and was very surprised. The protagonist was riding a hamster quickly towards him and said that the Titan's shell. Lloyd's eyes were full of determination and courage, and raising his shovel, the hero said that he was taking on this task. Xavier fell down and thought that he had gathered all his energy for this last blow and now his creation was clouded, he could rest in peace. Lloyd frowned and shouted to leave it to him. Xavier closed his eyes and thought why the Lord said so. Hippo flew forward. The blue-haired man plopped down on him. The hero frowned and told his companion to rest, the city needed to be defended. He thought that although he was running and screaming, he himself was not sure that he would succeed. The guy thought about how he could take the monster away from the city and finish it off. There was no certainty that it would not return back. The Creamel Sea had already become a habitat for megatitans. The monster was destroying the village. Lloyd thought that it had intelligence and could cause even more harm, wanting revenge. Peepodong ran forward and thought that he was at his maximum and could no longer do more. The hero shouted that the moment had come. The beast slowed down. Lloyd prepared to attack. Peepodong threw him up to the monster. The brunette swung and thought that everything he could do now seemed obvious. What could he do? He thought that earlier, when he decided to save the city and make his contribution, following the plans, he joined the attack. Lloyd frowned and thought that he should blow it up. He had no other choice. He thought that he needed triple rings to blow it up, but now he only had double rings. Lloyd frowned and started calling the app, the skill window, the clumsy bot. The system window appeared. The hero thought that he needed to level up. The system window said that 190 PR was needed. Lloyd thought that this was a ripoff, but now it didn't matter, he would figure it out later. He pressed the level up button. The guy saw that now 220 points were needed to level up. He thought that it would be difficult for him. Lloyd leveled up one level after another and thought that he would get a discount. Suddenly his pupils narrowed. The system window said that 370 PR was needed to level up. Sweat began to run down his face. His PR balance was 311. Lloyd gritted his teeth and thought that there was nothing he could do about it. It seemed that he had no plans to get into a fight. He had made a reasonable decision. The hero held the shovel and thought what he was even doing, hanging here in the air. Xavier opened his eyes. The brunette held the shovel in his teeth and thought whether he should just use mana and hit, and if there was even a small wound, bite. The blue-haired man closed his eyes. A system window appeared that his sympathy level had increased and was now +5. The hero frowned. A system window appeared that his PR balance was now 391. Lloyd gritted his teeth and thought that the triple rings should appear now. The system window said that the level was obtained. Double rings shone in the sky. Suddenly, another star lit up. A system window appeared that the triple rings technique was learned. Lloyd thrust the shovel into the monster and thought that one ring protected the heart. The monster's paw was rushing towards the ground. Then it sank into the ground. The hero swung and screamed. A stone was flying towards him. It hit him right in the head. Lloyd's eyes widened and thought what it was. He let go of his hand. The guy looked ahead in shock and thought that he couldn't fall. He needed to unhook another ring. One ring appeared in the sky. Then a second one appeared next to it. A third ring appeared next to it. The hero thought that there would be a collision now. Lloyd began to fall. He looked at the sky. There was a powerful explosion. The hero aimed the shovel at the monster's wound. He came closer. There was an explosion. The monster roared. Then it fell to the ground. People looked at the column of smoke. The dust near the dragon's body cleared. The moon was shining. The animals looked at the guy. Xavier opened his eyes. He got up and said that everyone was safe. The blue-haired man looked away. He looked at the dead monster and said that he could answer for his words, but how did he do it? Podong took his little finger. He asked what was wrong with him. Did he really want him to follow him? All the animals ran forward. Lloyd was lying on the ground. Xavier's eyes widened. The hero was staring into space. The guy ran to him and called him. He put his ear to his chest. The blue-haired man frowned. He looked at the master and said that his heart stopped. The bird flapped its wings. It flew over the settlement. The pigeon flew past the building. Arcus looked away when there was a knock. The carrier pigeon saluted him. The brunette took the letter and said that it was from Count Cremo. What was the matter? Suddenly his face darkened. He threw the saddle on the horse. The man pulled on the reins and screamed. Arcus galloped forward and thought about Lloyd. His eyebrows rose, thinking of how many times he had scolded him for putting himself in danger. The letter was addressed to the Baron, informing him that his eldest son had completed the construction in Cremo with incredible success. Marbella had caught up with her husband and was shouting at him to wait for her. How could he just leave without a plan? Arcus looked at her and said that even without stopping, the road was long, which was why only he and Bayern were riding. She replied that he was saying such things. Had he forgotten? She frowned and said that she was much better in the saddle than he was. The letter went on to say that almost immediately after the construction was completed, the city of Cremo came under attack. 3 horsemen were racing forward. The letter said that at this critical moment, Lloyd and his companion Xavier, having gathered all their courage, sacrificed themselves to save the inhabitants of the city. The 3 horsemen were making their way through a snowstorm. The letter said that Lloyd had ended up in a coma. Arcus squinted and thought that Lloyd was the most hated troublemaker, but now his son had become the most hardworking and trustworthy person. The letter continued that they thought it would be important for Arcus to know about this as soon as possible, so he was writing this letter. He would wait to meet the parents of this extraordinary man. The man frowned and thought about his son. The guy smiled and said that he was asking the Baron's permission. He frowned and told the Baron not to worry, he would do well. Lloyd bowed and said that he paid his respects to the Baron. Arcus looked ahead and thought, could this really be his son? The monster stepped on the snow. The riders looked at it in shock. There was a monster in front of them. The horse reared up in fear. The man got off. Bayern frowned and said that they could not escape. This was the shortest way. It would buy them some time, and they must find another way to Cremo. Arcus said that he must run. He replied that these creatures were faster than words. As soon as he turned around, they would cut off his head. The monster ran at him. The man turned around and shouted at them to run faster. The monster swung its paw. Bayern parried the blow. Arcus turned around and asked for his forgiveness. He said that they would meet in Cremo. The monster began to attack. Bayern gripped his sword tighter and parried the attack. Part of his sword flew off. He looked ahead in shock. The monster bit his shoulder. The man took out a dagger and plunged it into the monster's head. It knocked Bayern to the ground. He clenched his teeth. The monster bit his shoulder harder. The man screamed in pain. Arcus swung his sword. It pierced the monster. Marbella also ran forward with her sword. She pierced the monster with it. It stood up and screamed. The monster fell to the ground. It was shaking in pain. People looked at it. Arcus approached Bayern and asked if he could stand. He replied that he was ashamed of himself as a knight. The man frowned and said that he was also his feudal lord, which meant that he had to be responsible